I used to be just another hardworking employee in the marketing department, someone who always delivered more than my paycheck warranted. Then the boss's son walked into our office, and within 3 months, he'd destroyed my reputation, my confidence, and my self-respect. Today, I just signed a consulting contract with him. $50,000. Cash. Not because he thinks I'm brilliant, but because he knows I know what he'd pay anything to keep buried. My name is Elena Moore, and until 6 months ago, I believed hard work and keeping your head down was enough to succeed in corporate America. 32 years old, Nebraska State graduate, living in Wendell, Illinois, a forgettable town 2 hours outside Chicago, where rent is cheap and ambitions go to die. Every morning, I'd drive my 10-year-old Honda through cornfields and strip malls to reach the gleaming towers of downtown Chicago, where I worked as a marketing specialist for Brighton West Group. Brighton West wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. Commercial real estate and construction, the kind of company that survived recessions because people always need buildings. I'd been there 4 years, slowly climbing from coordinator to specialist, with my eye on a senior position. My cubicle was neat, my performance reviews stellar. My overtime hours countless and uncomplained about. The work itself was straightforward. Campaign strategies for new developments, client presentations, ROI reports that actually meant something. I was good at it, maybe not brilliant, but thorough, reliable. The kind of employee managers secretly depend on but rarely promote fast enough. I didn't mind. I'd grown up watching my mother clean office buildings at night. Having my own desk in one felt like victory enough. Our department ran smoothly under Patricia Walsh, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who valued competence over charisma. The pressure was manageable, deadlines reasonable, and there was even talk of expanding the team. I'd been unofficially promised the lead position on the new suburban development project, my chance to finally prove I was management material. Then, on a humid Tuesday in July, Patricia gathered us in the conference room. Mr. Barton himself, CEO and founder, stood at the head of the table. Beside him was someone I'd never seen before, a man in his late 20s with perfectly styled hair, a Stanford MBA according to the bio sheet passed around, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'd like you all to meet Kyle Barton," our CEO announced, his voice carrying the forced enthusiasm of a prepared speech. Kyle will be joining us as Director of Innovation, effective immediately. He'll be working closely with all departments to modernize our approach and bring fresh perspectives to Brighton West. Fresh from California, 2 weeks out of business school, and straight into a title that didn't exist until that morning. The nepotism was so blatant it felt like performance art, but we smiled, shook hands, welcomed him to the team. What else could we do? Kyle's handshake was firm, practiced, his voice carrying that particular confidence of someone who'd never had a resume rejected. "Looking forward to shaking things up," he said, scanning the room like a predator surveying territory. When his eyes met mine, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I just recognized the type. I'd served enough of them coffee during my college catering jobs. The ones who looked through you while looking at you, who smiled while calculating your dispensability. Within days, Kyle had an office, not a cubicle, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a direct line to his father. Within a week, he was sitting in on our meetings, interrupting presentations with questions that were really declarations of how things should change. Within 2 weeks, he'd annexed the conference room closest to our department as his innovation lab, where he held mysterious sessions with external consultants none of us had vetted. But I kept my head down, focused on my work. I had that suburban development project to think about, the promise of advancement, the rent to pay. I was just another worker bee, a term I'd soon learn he actually used, trying to make it through each day. I had no idea I'd already been marked as his first target. The humiliation started small, almost imperceptible. During my first presentation after Kyle's arrival, a comprehensive campaign strategy I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, he sat in the back, typing loudly on his laptop. Halfway through my slide on target demographics, he stood up. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, not sounding sorry at all. but I think we're overcomplicating this. Elena, right? Can we just skip to the budget? I felt 20 pairs of eyes on me. The budget analysis builds on the demographic research. If you'd like, I can. No need. He walked to the front, actually stepping between me and the projector. Let me show you what we did at Stanford. He connected his laptop, pulling up a generic template that could have been for any industry. See? Simple, clean. None of this. He waved dismissively at my work. Worker bee mentality. The room went silent. Patricia cleared her throat, but Kyle was already diving into his impromptu presentation, erasing 3 weeks of my work in 15 minutes of MBA jargon. It escalated from there. He'd forward my emails to the entire department with corrections highlighted in red, adding comments like, "This is why we need fresh perspectives," or "traditional thinking holding us back." Once, during a client meeting prep, he read one of my progress reports aloud in a mock serious voice, getting laughs from the younger staff who were eager to align with the boss's son. Elena thinks we should proceed with caution on the Riverside project, he announced, making air quotes. Anyone else feel like we're stuck in 2005? But the moment that broke something inside me came during our Q3 International Client Conference. 300 attendees, potential contracts worth millions. I was seated with the support staff, taking notes, when Kyle grabbed the microphone during the networking session. I want to recognize someone special, he announced. Elena Moore, where are you? Come on up here. My heart hammered as colleagues nudged me forward. I climbed the stage steps, professional smile frozen in place, having no idea what was coming. Elena here represents everything we're trying to evolve past at Brighton West, Kyle said, throwing an arm around my shoulders like we were old friends. She asked me yesterday, "What's the difference between marketing and innovation?" The crowd chuckled politely. I told her about 5 years of business school. I hadn't asked him anything. We'd barely spoken that week. Say something, Elena, he stage whispered into the mic. Tell everyone about your... What was it? Your traditional methodology? I stood there, 300 faces waiting, my mind blank. The silence stretched, someone coughed, Kyle's grin widened. Performance anxiety, he finally said, guiding me off stage to scattered, uncomfortable applause. It's okay, not everyone's built for the spotlight. That's why we need innovation leaders, right? I made it to the bathroom before the tears came. Locked in a stall. I pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw stars, trying to push the humiliation back down where it couldn't choke me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The scene replayed endlessly. The lights, the laughter, the arm around my shoulders that felt like a trap. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything, not for any grand plan, just to convince myself I wasn't going crazy, that this was really happening. August 15th, Kyle CC'd entire floor on email about my spelling error. Specialized versus specialized, both acceptable. August 22nd, announced in morning meeting that I was proof that not everyone needs to be a thought leader. August 29th, told Chicago Tribune reporter I was our typical back office employee when I was standing right there. September 5th, accidentally deleted my access to the campaign dashboards. Took it 3 days to restore. The insomnia got worse. I'd lie awake calculating how long my savings would last if I quit, wondering if I was being too sensitive, if this was just how modern business worked. I started eating lunch in my car, avoiding the break room where Kyle held court, turning eager young employees into his personal cheering section. Patricia tried, once, to intervene. Kyle's still adjusting, she told me privately. Different generation, different style, just keep doing your good work. But I could see it in her eyes. She was as trapped as I was. You don't challenge the CEO's son, you endure, or you leave. By late September, I'd lost 12 pounds and gained a prescription for anxiety medication. My work remained flawless, I made sure of that. If anything, I worked harder, stayed later, triple-checked everything. I wouldn't give him ammunition. But Kyle didn't need ammunition. He was manufacturing his own narrative. Elena Moore, The embodiment of corporate mediocrity, the worker bee, who proved why Brighton West desperately needed his innovative leadership. I should have quit. Any rational person would have. Instead, I started paying closer attention to Kyle Barton. Very close attention. And that's when I noticed the irregularities in his innovation lab expenses. I didn't quit. That was my first act of quiet rebellion, staying when he clearly wanted me gone. Every morning, I'd walk past his glass office, coffee in hand, and nod professionally. He'd look up from whatever he was doing, expecting to see defeat, and find only calm determination. The thing about bullies is they get sloppy when they think they've won. It started with an invoice that landed on my desk by mistake. A $15,000 charge for innovation consulting from a company called Vertex Solutions. The address was the apartment in Marina del Rey, California. The consultant's name, Jessica Huang, who, according to her Instagram, was Kyle's ex-girlfriend from Stanford. I should have sent it to accounting. Instead, I made a copy and started digging. The innovation lab Kyle had commandeered was supposed to revolutionize our marketing approach. In reality, it was a black hole for budget allocations. I began staying late, not to impress anyone, but to access the shared drives when fewer people were online. Kyle hadn't bothered to restrict his folder permissions properly. Arrogance makes people careless. What I found was a masterclass in corporate theft, dressed up in Silicon Valley speak. Design thinking workshops that were weekend trips to Naples. User experience research that was bottle service at Chicago clubs. Agile methodology training charged at $500 per hour to companies that existed only on paper. Every expense justified with buzzwords. Every receipt doctored just enough to pass a casual glance. But the real discovery was the ROI reports. Kyle had been inflating engagement metrics by purchasing bot traffic, then presenting the fake numbers as proof of his innovative strategies. The Riverside project he'd mocked me for approaching cautiously? He'd reported a 345% increase in digital engagement. The actual number was closer to 12%. I documented everything meticulously. Screenshots saved to an encrypted drive. Emails forwarded to a personal account I'd created specifically for this purpose. Meeting recordings where Kyle bragged about gaming the system, not knowing my phone was capturing every word from my pocket. October became my month of patient observation. While Kyle performed his power plays, I built my insurance policy. I learned his patterns, how he submitted expenses just before holiday weekends when accounting was skeletal. How he scheduled his fake consulting sessions during major client presentations when everyone was distracted. The journal evolved from emotional release to strategic documentation. October 3rd. Kyle submitted $8,000 in research materials during the Goldman presentation. Actual purchase, high-end gaming laptop delivered to his apartment. October 11th, Jessica Huang's consulting firm billed another $20,000. Cross-referenced with her LinkedIn, she's been in Bali since September. October 18th, overheard Kyle telling Brad from sales about teaching the old guard a lesson. Direct quote, "My dad thinks I'm transforming this place. Really, I'm just showing him how easy it is to milk these idiots." October 25th. The Meridian campaign Kyle takes credit for was 90% Patricia's work from Q1. I have the original files with timestamps. I stopped taking the anxiety medication. For the first time in months, I had clarity. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about choosing the right moment. The beautiful part was that Kyle had no idea. He still saw me as the defeated worker bee, too traditional and scared to be a threat. When he'd pass my cubicle, he'd make little buzzing sounds. His followers would laugh. I'd smile and return to my spreadsheets, each one containing another piece of evidence. Patricia announced her early retirement in early November. "Time for fresh leadership," she said, fooling no one. Kyle had finally forced her out. Her replacement was a 26-year-old innovation specialist from Kyle's Stanford network who thought PowerPoint was too analog. That night, I sat in my Wendell apartment, looking at 6 months of evidence organized in neat digital folders. Enough to end Kyle's career, possibly land him in jail. Definitely enough to destroy the relationship with his father. But I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. Because I'd learned something crucial during those late nights of research. Kyle wasn't just arrogant, he was desperate. Every stolen dollar, every inflated metric was an attempt to prove he deserved his position. That he wasn't just another nepotism hire. Desperate people make the best marks. So I waited, continued my documentation. Let him think he'd won completely. I even started sleeping better, knowing that my insomnia had transformed into something useful. Patient, methodical preparation for the moment when Kyle Barton would need me more than I'd ever needed this job. That moment was coming sooner than either of us expected. The universe has a sense of humor. Kyle's downfall began with the very project he'd mocked me for approaching cautiously, Riverside. It was supposed to be his crown jewel. A mixed-use development that would revolutionize urban living through innovative marketing synergy. He'd promised the investors something spectacular, a completely digital campaign targeting millennials, featuring virtual reality tours, influencer partnerships, and what he called guerrilla digital tactics. The November launch was a disaster of almost poetic proportions. The VR tours made people nauseous, literally. 3 journalists vomited during the press preview. The influencers he'd hired turned out to be mostly bots and teenagers from Belarus. The guerrilla tactics included illegally placed QR codes that got the company fined by the city. But the death blow came when a tech blogger discovered that the revolutionary app Kyle had commissioned for $2.3 million was just a reskinned template bought for $49 on Code Canyon. By December, Riverside had become a meme. Riverside reality was trending, featuring videos of people pretending to throw up while looking at condos. The investor group pulled out, taking their $1.2 million contract with them. Worse, they were considering legal action. I watched Kyle unravel from my cubicle perch. The swagger disappeared first, replaced by sharp movements and barked orders. He started arriving earlier, leaving later, his hair no longer perfectly styled. The innovation lab became a war room where he berated his Stanford hires for not thinking bigger. Then came the meeting that changed everything. December 15th, 3:47 p.m. I'll never forget it. The entire floor could hear CEO Barton's voice from the executive conference room. How the hell did you lose Henderson Group? Do you understand what this means for our reputation? Dad, if you just... Don't dad me in this building. You're an employee who just cost us 7 figures and made us a laughingstock. The door slammed. Kyle emerged looking like he'd aged 5 years in 50 minutes. His shirt was untucked, face flushed. For a moment, our eyes met across the cubicle farm. I saw something I hadn't expected, genuine fear. The next few days were tense. Rumors flew about layoffs, about heads rolling. Kyle's Stanford squad started updating their LinkedIns. The innovation lab sat empty while Kyle holed up in his office, blinds drawn. Then, on December 19th, he appeared at my cubicle. Elena. His voice was different, smaller. Can we talk? I followed him to a small conference room, noting how his hands shook slightly as he closed the door. I know we've had our differences, he began, attempting his old smile. It cracked at the edges. But you've been here a while. You understand how things work. I said nothing, letting silence do the heavy lifting. The Riverside thing, it wasn't entirely my fault. Bad vendors, could happen to anyone. He was sweating despite the December chill. I'm thinking maybe you could help me put together a report for the board, show them how the traditional metrics don't capture innovative approaches. I'm just a worker bee, I said evenly. Remember? His jaw tightened. Look, I need someone who knows the numbers. The real numbers. Patricia's gone, and you're the only one who... I know what you've been doing. Kyle. The words hung between us like a blade. I don't know what you... Vertex Solutions, Jessica Huang, the bot traffic, the expense reports, all of it. I've seen people go pale in movies. In real life, it's more subtle, a graying, like color draining through their feet. Kyle gripped the conference table. You don't have proof. I pulled out my phone, showed him a single screenshot, one of 50 I had, his $15,000 consulting invoice. That could be legitimate. You can't prove. I have 6 months of proof. Every receipt, every inflated metric, every dollar you stole thinking no one was paying attention. He tried to rebuild his composure, straightening his shoulders. So what? You're going to blackmail me? That's illegal. I'm not going to do anything, I said, standing to leave. Yet, I left him in that conference room and went back to my cubicle. Within an hour, he texted me, "We need to talk. Please." I didn't respond. Let him sweat through the night, wondering when the axe would fall. By December 20th, Kyle Barton, Director of Innovation, was ready to beg. He just didn't know it yet. The hunter had become the hunted. And I'd learned something valuable. Patience wasn't just a virtue in corporate America. It was a weapon. December 22nd. The office was nearly empty, most people already gone for the holidays. I'd stayed late deliberately, knowing Kyle would still be there, stewing in his glass office like a trapped fish. At 7:43 p.m., I sent an email to the anonymous tip line of our internal legal department. No accusations, just a simple note. Concerned about unusual patterns in marketing innovation budget, supporting documentation available upon request. Then I waited. It took exactly 1 hour and 16 minutes for Kyle to appear at my cubicle, wild-eyed and breathing hard. "What did you do?" "I protected the company's interests," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Something about fiduciary responsibility. They teach that at Stanford, right? Call them back. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." Anonymous tip line. Kyle. Couldn't even if I wanted to. He grabbed the edge of my desk, knuckles white. For a moment, I thought he might flip it. Then he seemed to remember the security cameras. "What do you want?" The words came out strangled. I finally looked at him. Really looked. The golden boy who'd humiliated me for sport, now sweating through his $200 shirt. "I want to help," I said. "Help?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You just—" I sent a concern, not evidence. There's a difference. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared for this moment. Legal will start their investigation after the holidays. That gives you 6 days to get your story straight. My story? The one where you're not a thief, where you're just an overeager innovator who made some accounting errors, where the inflated metrics were vendor mistakes, not fraud. I slid the folder across. Lucky for you, I've already written it. He opened it slowly. Inside was a comprehensive communication strategy, complete with revised reports, explanations for every discrepancy, and a narrative that painted him as naive rather than criminal. It was brilliant work, some of my best. This is... He looked up, confused. "Why would you help me?" "I'm not helping you. I'm offering my services as a crisis management consultant, independent contractor. Of course. My rate is $50,000. $50,000? Are you insane? That's less than what you paid Jessica for her Bali vacation." I leaned back. "Or you can explain to legal and your father how you spent $500,000 in company funds on fake consulting and nightclub research." The silence stretched. I could see him doing the math, weighing options that all led to the same conclusion. Even if I wanted to, I can't just write a check for $50,000. Sure you can. Vertex Solutions has issued 6 invoices for amounts larger than that. Issue 1 more for crisis communication consulting. I'll even provide real services. This is extortion. This is consulting. You're free to refuse and handle legal on your own. I'm sure your father will be very understanding about the theft, especially after Riverside. His face cycled through emotions: rage, fear, calculation, and finally, defeat. "If I pay you, this all goes away? The investigation will find accounting irregularities that you'll voluntarily correct. You'll implement new oversight measures, learn from your mistakes, might even make you look responsible. Yours, and the evidence you have? Stays with me, insurance policy, you stay clean, I stay quiet." He was trapped, and we both knew it. Pay me, or face criminal charges and his father's wrath? The choice was obvious. I need guarantees. You need to make a decision. The banks are closed Monday for Christmas. That means you have tomorrow to wire the funds. After that, I can't guarantee my consultation will be as comprehensive. December 23rd, 4:17 p.m. The wire transfer hit my account. $50,000 from Vertex Solutions for Strategic Crisis Communication Consulting. I sent Kyle a professional invoice and a contract outlining my services. All perfectly legal. Then I got to work building his defense, creating a paper trail that would satisfy legal while keeping him employed. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because Kyle thought he was buying my silence. What he'd actually purchased was his own cage, one built from his secrets and my patience. The best part? He signed the contract himself, making me his official consultant, which meant everything I did next would just be fulfilling my professional obligations. After all, I'd learned from the best how to hide destruction behind corporate speak and innovation. I kept my word. Over the holiday break, I crafted Kyle's redemption story with the precision of a surgeon. New reports showing vendor errors. Revised metrics with footnotes explaining the misunderstandings. A humble email to legal about discovering discrepancies while conducting year-end reviews and voluntarily correcting them. By January 2nd, Kyle Barton was still employed. The investigation found procedural improvements needed, but no criminal intent. His father gave him a stern lecture about oversight and a probationary period. Kyle even managed to spin it as a learning experience in a staff meeting, talking about the importance of financial vigilance in innovation. I sat in that meeting, taking notes like always, watching him perform his rehearsed humility. He caught my eye once, a quick nod of what might have been gratitude or fear. Both worked for me. But while I was saving Kyle professionally, I was also composing his symphony of destruction. On January 8th, I created a Proton Mail account and sent a carefully crafted message to Derek Morrison, an investigative journalist at the Chicago Tribune known for corporate exposés. The subject line, Stanford MBA's innovative approach to expense reports. I included just enough. 3 receipts showing personal purchases, 2 emails where Kyle bragged about milking the system, and a snippet of his ROI inflation strategy. Not enough to destroy Brighton West. I still worked there, after all. But sufficient to make Kyle radioactive in Chicago's business community. I was selective, strategic. Nothing that would implicate his father or tank the company. Just Kyle's innovations. The story ran January 15th. Golden Boy or Fool's Gold. The rise and stumble of a CEO's son made the business section's front page. Derek had done his homework, finding former Stanford classmates who confirmed Kyle's tendency to cut corners, tracking down vendors who admitted to inflating invoices at his request. Kyle's name was mentioned 17 times. Brighton West, only twice. And positively, as a company, taking swift action to address procedural concerns. The morning the article dropped, Kyle locked himself in his office. Through the glass, I watched him field calls, his face cycling between panic and rage. His Stanford network, so eager to follow him months ago, went silent. The innovation lab emptied as his remaining allies distanced themselves, but I still showed up to our consulting meetings, professional as ever. "You did this," he said during one session, voice hollow. "Did what? I saved you from criminal charges. The Tribune must have had their own sources. This is exactly what I paid you to prevent." I pulled out our contract. "You paid me for crisis communication regarding the internal investigation, which was successful. I can't control what journalists investigate independently." He wanted to scream. I could see it. But what could he say? That he'd paid me to cover up his crimes and I'd only done half the job? The best part was that Kyle couldn't fire me. I was an independent consultant now, with a contract he'd desperately signed. He also couldn't retaliate. I still had enough evidence to bury him completely. So we continued our charade. I attended meetings, provided reports, billed my hours. Kyle performed his diminished role, no longer the golden innovator, but the chastened son learning hard lessons. His father moved his office to a different floor, away from the executive suite. The innovation lab became a regular conference room again. By February, Kyle was a ghost in his own company, still employed but defanged. He came in, did basic work, avoided eye contact. The buzzing sounds stopped. The worker bee had outlasted the drone. I gave notice on February 28th, citing an exciting consulting opportunity in Boston. My farewell party was well attended. Even Patricia called to congratulate me. Kyle didn't come, but he sent an email. Best of luck in your future endeavors. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. My final invoice to Vertex Solutions included a note. Consultation complete, no further services required. Kyle paid it within hours. The moving truck came, March 15th. As I packed up my Wendell apartment, I thought about the past year, the humiliation, the insomnia, the meticulous plotting. $50,000 wasn't just payment, it was tuition for the education Kyle had unknowingly given me. He taught me that corporate America rewards appearances over substance, that cruel people create their own vulnerabilities, and that patience paired with intelligence beats MBA swagger every time. Most importantly, he'd shown me I was done being anyone's worker bee. Boston was waiting, and with it, my new consulting firm, More Strategic Communications, specializing in crisis management, reputation repair, and discrete problem-solving for executives with complicated situations. My first 3 clients came from LinkedIn messages the day after the Tribune article ran. Turns out, Kyle wasn't the only executive with secrets worth $50,000. 3 years later, I'm sitting in my Boston office, real office, not a cubicle, reviewing quarterly reports for More Strategic Communications. 8 employees, 16 active clients, and a reputation for solving unsolvable problems. The kind of problems executives create when they think they're too smart to get caught. My phone buzzes. Unknown Chicago number. Elena Moore. Elena, it's Kyle. I hadn't heard his voice in years, but it was unmistakable. Older now, weighted with something that sounded like genuine humility. Kyle, how unexpected. I need your help, professional help. I'll pay your full rate. I almost laughed. The universe really did have a sense of humor. I don't take clients from my past, I said. Please, just hear me out. I'm not at Brighton West anymore. I'm trying to start my own firm. But the Tribune article, it follows me everywhere. No one will work with me. I've changed. Elena, I really have. Changed. I went to therapy, figured out why I was such a... He paused. Why I treated people like I did. My father, the pressure, the fear of being seen as just another nepotism hire. Not excuses, just understanding. I looked out at the Boston skyline, thinking about circles and karma and the weight of carrying someone else's destruction. I can't help you, Kyle. I'm not asking you to lie, just help me tell the truth better. Show people who I am now, not who I was then. The truth? I leaned back in my chair. The truth is that you destroyed your own reputation by destroying others. You taught me that humiliation was currency and cruelty was leadership. And then you paid me $50,000 to learn that lesson yourself. Silence on the other end. I know, he finally said. I know what I did to you, to Patricia, to everyone. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. Elena. It was the first genuine thing I'd ever heard him say. I appreciate that, I said. But I still can't help you. Can't or won't. Both. My firm has a strict policy against working with individuals who've engaged in financial fraud, liability issues. You understand. Another pause. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, soft and rueful. You know what the ironic part is? You're the most brilliant strategist I've ever met. That whole plan, saving me while destroying me, it was masterful. I've studied it for years, trying to understand how you did it. I learned from the best, I said. You taught me that innovation means finding new ways to achieve old goals. I created my own destroyer. No, Kyle. You created a survivor. There's a difference. We sat in silence for a moment, connected by years and miles and the strange intimacy of mutual destruction. For what it's worth, he said finally, I tell people about you. When they ask how I lost everything, I tell them about the marketing specialist who out-innovated the innovator. Some of them think I'm bitter. But I'm not. I'm impressed. Goodbye, Kyle. Yeah, goodbye, Elena. I hung up and returned to my reports. My afternoon was booked solid. A senator's daughter with a social media scandal, a tech CEO with an insider trading problem, a pharmaceutical executive with whistleblower concerns, all willing to pay premium rates for the kind of strategic thinking that turns catastrophes into comebacks. I'd built an empire on the skills Kyle had unknowingly taught me, the patience he'd forced me to develop, the strategic thinking born from necessity, the understanding that in corporate America, information is the only currency that really matters. But the most valuable lesson came from those sleepless nights in Wendell, documenting every slight while planning my survival. Power isn't about making others feel small. It's about knowing when to stay silent and when to speak, when to build and when to burn, when to collect $50,000 and when to walk away. I never told Kyle about the donation I'd made to a Chicago women's shelter, exactly $50,000, the week I left. Blood money transformed into something useful. Another innovation he'd never understand. My assistant knocks, reminding me about my 2 p.m. consultation. I close Kyle's file in my mind, filing it under lessons learned. There's no satisfaction in his struggle, no joy in his defeat, just the quiet acknowledgement that we'd both gotten exactly what we'd earned. I smooth my dress, check my reflection, prepare to meet another executive with another crisis. But I catch myself smiling at one thought. I never did learn to buzz like a worker bee. Instead, I learned something better. I learned to sting like a queen. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If you enjoyed this story about corporate revenge and patient justice, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace karma in the comments. Have you ever had a Kyle in your life? How did you handle it? Let's discuss.